Welcome to this edition of Whose Side News. Today is October 10th, 2012. We're so happy that you could join us because we have some top news for today from affirmative action to the 2012 presidential question is the media involved? Stay tuned for more. Let's talk about some of those topics that I had a filibuster there. Supreme Court considers affirmative action case. According to the Black Voices, is the media responsible for Romney's rise, according to the Griot? And then we finally get to take a look at our Whose Side infamous cloud to see your comments and what you have to say about some of the events happening all over the nation. And Whose Side News likes to cover everything from African American to African diaspora. Whatever is happening in the community and is affecting us, we cover it and those top issues. So, welcome. My name is Julia Dudley Najib, and it is a pleasure that you are joining me. Or hopefully you're looking at this broadcast maybe later in your leisure. So it's about time to talk about the first topic, dealing with affirmative action. Supreme Court considers affirmative action case according to Black Voices News off of the Huffington Post. So the Supreme Court is taking up the challenge to, and let me see what that's saying. Okay, the Supreme Court is taking up a challenge to a University of Texas Austin program that considers race in some college admissions. The case could produce new limits on affirmative action at universities or roll it back entirely. Abigail Fisher is the white Texan who is suing the university, and she was denied entrance in 2008. Reverend Jesse Jackson, he's a supporter of affirmative action. He was among the advocates on both sides of the issue who gathered outside the court, and people are continuing to gather outside the court to see what is going to happen on this case. The university says the program that fills roughly a quarter of its incoming classes uses race among many factors and argues that it is necessary to provide the kind of diverse educational experience the High Court has previously endorsed. The rest of its slots go to students who are admitted based on their class rank without regard to race. Opponents of the program say the university is practicing illegal discrimination by considering race at all. Of course, some people beg to differ, and hence we have this debate outside the courtroom where it's dependent on one of the Supreme Court justices, which would be Kennedy. That's going to be the deciding vote, according to what the latest information is out there. And so we have this case of affirmative action, and maybe we need some clarification on affirmative action's purpose. And although it was, and we're going to talk about that momentarily as far as the original purpose, but the affirmative action today is still instilled in a lot of systems because there are injustices when it comes to the corporate world for women, as an example. When it comes to the payment and how the pay scale is, there's certainly still discrimination in the corporate level for African Americans as well as other minorities. So those are things to consider when we're looking at this affirmative action case. Do we just throw out history and say it doesn't matter, or do we adhere to our stereotypes and what we think matters when we look at the news, who seems to think, or not the news, but beyond the news, we use it as the caveat to be able to have our impressions of stereotypes that we think are still out there. For instance, the welfare system, and we talk about that. And so those are some of the challenges that these justices are going to have to deal with when it comes to affirmative action. Hate to be in their shoes, but again, we have to make sure we consider the long history behind affirmative action, where it has helped many people who had outstanding backgrounds. A lot of times we think that it's just affirmative action helps minorities no matter whether they're good at what they do or not, and that's just simply not the case. It's helped, like I said, women, striving women who have been successful. It's helped African American peoples who are at the top of their class and on the upper echelon in business. So these are things to consider instead of taking in those stereotypes that sometimes get us boggled down in the politics of affirmative action. And his original purpose, O'Connor, kind of instilled that back in. And so now we have this revisited, the situation is being revisited, and yet we have this situation on our hand in Texas, who felt like they were trying to do the right thing in promoting diversity. And diversity is still a problem in Texas. Had members of my family that have gone to certain colleges there, and we're still called boy and other racial terms and other derogatory things. So I understand why they're trying to infiltrate more diversity instead of digressing. In this situation, we have digressed, and where this young lady feels discriminated against, and it's her right to sue and to be able to have a voice. This is true. And at the same time, I hope that we consider the long history of affirmative action of people that it has helped, and these people have been in the upper echelon of corporate business and education. It's just something to consider as we go through this case. Meanwhile, there have been comments, and we'd like to definitely see the comments that are out there. We feel that your voice is just as important. So these are some of the comments that came from Black voices on the affirmative action case. And this comment says, "You simply cannot legislate away racism. The idea that we are all equal is utopian. Fact is, we are all different, very different, and we all have different desires and ambitions, skill sets and talents. And the things that set us apart are what make us an asset to employers and spouses and friends. Opportunities should be available to everyone without regard to our human variables, with the most desirable applicant having first consideration, period." And again, these are comments from the Huffington Post, Black Voices, and we honor these comments because that's a First Amendment right, and it's great to hear what the public is saying instead of always an expert on television or what the mainstream media might be putting out there. Your voices are being heard, at least on our show, Whose Side News, and we'll continue to hear other voices and points of view from some of our African American correspondents and those that and publishers from some of these African American blogs and also television and radio talk shows. So finally, with the second comment in regards to this issue before we move forward with our next, Johnson's Great Society program bears the brunt of responsibility for the now institutionalized poor people, sedated for more than a generation, having no skills whatsoever and no incentive to gain working skills. Considering they live rather comfortably gaming the system, all things being equal, of government programs available to them, they as clients are never weaned from the teat of welfare state. They simply learn how to milk it more efficiently. Eleanor Roosevelt was the effort behind the creation of the social programs that ultimately eroded the Black family. The killing blow was matrifocal welfare programs put in place during the Johnson administration. Rather than focus on keeping Black men employed and able to provide for their families, Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act with full affirmative action for women. White women benefited from affirmative action more than anyone, and created a welfare system that rewarded women for illegitimate births and single motherhood, casting off Black men, leaving them rootless. America's remedy? Build an enormous incarceration industry. Today, the primary form of welfare for Black men in the United States is the criminal justice system. While HUD created and oversees the largest rent-controlled slums in the country. And again, these are comments from you, the audience, from you, the posters, from you, Americans that care and have a voice. And it's true, we have to consider the incarceration system here in America that is predominantly filled with minority and African American, and I won't say minority more, but it's because the minority is becoming the majority. I want to say really people of color. This is something to consider when we're looking at the money that we're putting into prison systems versus the money that we're putting into helping programs that do help Black America, preferably the African American male, who by the second is dropping out, unemployed, and still these remedies have not had a solutions even since the days of slavery, which is institutionalized 400 years. And so even though people say, well, you really can't blame slavery, well, we still have a lot of things to work on. And if affirmative action isn't the tool, then there's got to be other ones out there. Meanwhile, let's get to our next topic. This is a hot one because, of course, it involves the media. Dun, 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 the media. Is the media responsible for Romney's rise? According to the Griot, one of the African-American blog, yes, they are. Or yes, the media is. Instead of are, the media is. And so we're going to be looking at this because tomorrow we have the vice presidential debates that are coming up between Vice President Joe Biden and Vice President that is coming to be in that electoral seat, Paul Ryan. So this will be interesting to see that, how the media fuels and turns up and turns that around. So let's take a look at what they are saying if the media is responsible. We have to consider this topic because as we look at all these polls that are coming out, we get excited by polls, the emotion of it all, and yet it's really the emotion of America at that moment. And some of us are using that as a tool to decide election. Let's see what these polls are saying as an example. The latest Gallup poll of likely voters has the former Massachusetts governor with a 2-point lead over the president, while a Pew poll gives Romney a 4-point lead. Rasmussen and Reuters and Ipsos have the two candidates tied up at 48% and 45%, respectively, while the Real Clear Politics average of the major tracking polls gives Romney a 48 to 47.3% advantage. Early post-debate polling was not nearly as harsh on Obama as the subsequent offerings by media reports and political punditry. And in any case, nearly half of respondents in a CNN poll said the debate did not make them more likely to vote for either candidate. So now we're looking at these polls as a measurement of how the elections are going to go, and we're finding that according to the GRIO, that may not be the case. And of course, according to past elections where certain presidential candidates were up, and they seem to be up in the polls, it was not the case in the actual election. So as we look at the next comment, Romney scored on delivery but lacked substance, this is according to the GRIO, and presented a more moderate stance that contradicted the severely conservative persona he assumed throughout this election season. There were no zingers or memorable exchanges from the matchup, except for Romney's pledge to kill Big Bird and defund PBS, but even that statement could come back to bite the GOP candidate. Most of all, Romney lied liberally, doing a better job of making stuff up in order to win. Big Bird is all over the place. It's on Twitter, it's in candidate ads, President Barack Obama's ad, and so I know that's been a big hoopla. We've been seeing that in the Twitter feed out there about Big Bird. So that totally got everyone off focus in this presidential election debate, the first debate. And it's amazing how Big Bird has such an influence on our American community. It just shows how much of us grew up on Big Bird and how much compassion we have for Big Bird for it to be used so much in an ad that is fueling people. And now I wonder if there's going to be a poll on that. How many people think the ad is disgraceful? Some people have already discussed their disinterest with that particular ad that the Obama campaign has put out. Meanwhile, there's more to say about these polls, and the GRIO has a couple of more points that I'd like to point out. It says, meanwhile, Nate Silver over at 538 crunched the numbers and puts the president's chances of winning at 71.2% with 297 electoral votes. Silver argues that the fundamentals of the race have not changed. Obama is ahead in most of the swing states. And the latest national polls, some of which have shaky methodology, we know that, we've talked about that, that's been in the news, are worshipped as other evidence is ignored. For example, the latest jobs numbers are favorable news for Obama, as unemployment dropped below 8% and job growth is higher than in previous election years. The online prediction market site InTrade gives Obama 62% chance of re-election, and Obama has a 65% likelihood of victory according to the PredictWise. So we know that the polls are just an understanding of where America is right now. In this reality show era, there's a need for drama and intrigue. A close race provides just that. A wide margin of victory is not so much of a story, but the narrative of Romney as the underdog on the rise or Obama as a comeback kid is far more appealing to media spin doctors. Hence, the media has a job to do because they have to keep their jobs, right? So they've also got to provide for their advertisers an audience. And that way you, American public, is able to buy the ads in between all of this hoopla, all this stuff going on in the media. And so that's their job to do that. The publisher of a newspaper has to do what he or she has to do to survive, so the newspaper survives. It's the same thing with television. They have to do what they have to do to keep their jobs, keep the advertisers happy, and so it's great for media frenzy. Not necessarily the way to be able to pick who you're going to vote for. We always challenge you to look at the facts, go to these candidates' websites to find out the information, look at the flip-flopping Romney and other issues and concerns that have been brought up. And so we talk about that to say, you know, it's important to do your research. There's a lot of emotions going out there. In fact, we're about to get to our Whose Side infamous cloud review that can't stop talking about what's happening in the presidential election, especially with this first debate. In fact, tonight on one of the night program, I believe with Sawyer, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, I'm not quite sure. President Barack Obama is going to be telling us his 2 cents of what happened in that first presidential debate where people are criticizing him for not doing a good job. And it is fair to say that Governor Mitt Romney perhaps did well in that debate, and hence you have the far right that is using that to their advantage, rightly so. And whereas President Barack Obama is getting a lot of slack for this debate. But mind you, debates are part of that poll when you look at the emotions of people. That's all it is. It's simply an emotion, and people are getting fired up about a debate, and hence the media saying, oh, yes, in the polls, it shows that because of that debate, Romney is now up. Governor Mitt Romney is on the trail, and he's out there campaigning. So we have to remember that words are just that. And in debates, it's salesmanship. It's selling one's point of view. But we also have to look at people's track record. Look at President Barack Obama's track record. What promises has he made? Which ones has he kept? Which ones did not quite come through? It's the same thing with Governor Mitt Romney, who flip-flops a lot on his positions and stance, the most recent one dealing with women's right to life and so forth, and that has been hitting the news. So the media is doing what they can to keep it going, and meanwhile the American public, you and I, are watching this as it's going on and eating it up, and we just can't get enough of it. So we keep watching the media. But again, Whose Side News, and we like to make sure that you go and do your research, find out what's really going on. And we're going to find out what's really going on right now as we take a look at our Whose Side Infamous Cloud Review. That's going to give us it's going to give us an idea of what people are feeling. Now, there's been a couple of things that have been out there, and people have been quite emotional about it, and I definitely want to discuss that. And in our blogosphere of what's happening, people are commenting on the woman who is an actress. I want to say a show dealing with single ladies. I want to say it's from the USA Network. Don't quote me on that. It might be VH1. But either way, she's African American, and she happened to have her stance on how she feels about Governor Mitt Romney. She is supporting him, and she's not Obama's supporter. She happens to be African American. Well, we have to remember that we have to give these people a right. It's a First Amendment right for them to choose who they want to vote for and to profess who they support. But what I don't support is the derogatory language that has gone out on this woman for her support of Governor Mitt Romney. This actress has a right to be who she is, just like all the other actresses like Sidney Poitier and others that are supporting President Barack Obama. So in all fairness, let's make sure we look at people's judgments and comments as for what they are, the right to have them. One comment from Black America says, Obama's legacy on Black America is on the Right Side News. Take a look at that. Obama shout out to Black America on Sky News. Got to see what that's about. President Obama, Muslim extremists use video as excuse to attack U.S. News One. News One is another source that we like to use for our information. In second term, Obama will allow UN to tax Americans. That's according to Fox News. So even Fox has gotten now into our infamous cloud that you can check out on our website at amptvnow.com. And at the bottom, there's a menu. You go to Whose Side, and that is where you can click on, or that cloud is actually on every page. So you can look at that bottom and see what people are saying and kind of put your cursor around and see what's going on. Affirmative action is huge. We know. It says we can't afford to lose affirmative action at colleges and universities. This is according to News One. Find out what they're saying and what their feelings are. And you can click any of these links to get to these sources. It's just great to see breaking news happening right now in our cloud from you, America, the American public. And so we honor that, and we like to read these over the air. It says, Madeleine Albright, Romney dead wrong on foreign policy, according to News One. And there's other comments out there, even from people like you and I, and news comments. At BET News, or at BT News Second Coming event, it asks, will Black America decide 2012? So Black America, will you decide? Will President Barack Obama be your second term president? That's the question of the hour. That's the question that a lot of people are asking. And check it out on our Whose Side, Black Diaspora, blogosphere, internet worldwide, what thoughts are happening right now. Well, it's definitely been a joy to talk on this program about what's happening in the news. We want to continue to bring the greatest news from the African and African American community, what is affecting you, and we accept comments. Please comment on our Facebook, drop us an email. We'd like to say those over the air and online, and we will make sure this programming gets on our Bounce TV channels as well as on our local online channel, Whose Side. Check us out. Check out all of our programming. Thank you for staying tuned in. My name is Julia Dudley Najee. Have a great afternoon.